just put a like on it so you can raise our ratings. But just so you know, we're going to talk about some difficult things today. So to do that, first of all, I want to welcome you, Avidai Gimpel, to the Carolyn Glick Show, and thank you for everything that you're doing for Am Yisrael, for the state of Israel. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you for having me. Since I've been doing this work, I've had literally a fire in my belly, feeling like the world needs to know what happened to our brothers and sisters. And I so appreciate that you are giving me this opportunity to share this horrific story, because the fact that I came back from preparing bodies.
Wait, so before you start explaining, tell me for a second, what's your day job in normal time?
That exact before the war?
Yeah.
I'm a special educator, and my area of specialty is ADHD. I'm a college lecturer. I'm an author. That's back in the day.
That's before October 7th.
Yeah.
And what's your sideline? Like, how did somebody who's an ADHD specialist get involved with the atrocities of October 7th? What's your background in that?
So a couple of years back, a dear friend of mine passed away, and she had been very active in the Burial Society in the Chavra Kadisha. And in her memory, I decided to join the Chavra Kadisha, and as a volunteer in Gush Etzion. And I actually, because there are so many women volunteering in Gush Etzion, I had only merited to prepare one body for burial, and that was, I guess, that preparation was to know that I can handle handling a dead body, and that I could be in the same room, and that I have that ability to do that.
So, what for people who are unaware, what does that mean under Jewish ritual, Jewish law, to prepare a body? What's a standard procedure? What does that mean?
So, as opposed to what we did
in summer
now, preparing a Jewish body for burial, we have the utmost respect for the body, for life, and even for afterlife. So we make sure that the body is fully clean, that nails are clean, that the body is washed down, there's no jewelry, there's no wounds that are not attended to, and then the body is dressed in beautiful clean linens and wrapped for burial. That's what the procedure was. The normal procedure.
That's the normal procedure.
Yeah.
And so on October 7th, we had a slaughter of more than 1,400 people in the South. And what happened? What phone call did you get? What?
So obviously it took a bunch of days for Zaka to gather the bodies. And so many more men than women have been slaughtered. So my husband was called in because he's also part of the Burial Society. He mainly digs graves. And he was called in, and for the first day or two, he was doing this holy work, which is not purifying the bodies. It's only preparation of the bodies. Someone who dies in God's name because they're Jewish does not need this kind of preparation for burial, because they're already considered holy and pure. So therefore, it's just preparing their bodies in order to bury them in the most respectful way possible. So he had started, and then they started getting a lot of bodies from the party and from the different kibbutzim, moshavim in the area, and they needed women to join. So right away, I volunteered. I invited a couple of friends to join as well, and basically the Chavra Kadisha of Gush Etzion was the one who sent all of the representative volunteers to Rishon LeZion, where we were doing the work, where Zaka was bringing the bodies for the work.
So, okay. So your husband is preparing the men. Can you just give a sense of what he saw? What state the men that he received were in?
He was broken in incredibly quickly. You can't prepare for this job. But he got a rude awakening immediately, because the first 3 bodies that he prepared were headless. And there's no head to be found. The bodies were identified by DNA or tattoos or other indicators, but there was no head there.
And were there a lot of decapitated corpses that came in?
I think more men were decapitated. We had bodies that came in that we could not determine where the head and where the legs of the body were.
So let's just go back. So you could call in with the women, and how many people do you think were brought into where you were while you were working? How many do you think that you had?
We had 2 simultaneous men's teams and women's teams.
So 4 teams?
4 teams all together running throughout. And that first Saturday night, not right after the slaughter, but a full week later.
So October 14th.
Yes. We worked into the night, and it was really body after body. I would say our team from Gusion and the other women, that local women, we probably throughout the week prepared for burial between 50 and 60 bodies. And then there were the other teams that were working just as
So that'd be
hard.
200 then, if you have 4 teams doing 50 bodies a week. Like a whole week, you were only able to do 50 bodies. Why is that?
That was the bodies that were brought to us. There were other locations, and there were more men than women as well. So the men did more than that.
So what was the condition of the remains that you received?
Many different scenarios. Every single one incredibly horrifyingly difficult. From multiple stab wounds or shot wounds to decapitated bodies, and like I said, not knowing where. And for Jewish burial, it's very important to be able to determine where the head of the body is in order to bury properly. And sometimes we just had to guess. The most horrifying, I mean, everything was the most horrifying, but we got actually bags of charcoal, small bags of charcoal of our Jewish babies, sisters, mothers, grandmothers. And we had to figure out a way to not lose any of that charcoal and bury and with the most respect possible, wrap that and create the shape of a body.
How much did they weigh?
Nearly nothing. There was one that was a little more. My sense is that one of them was a baby, only because it was so small. It weighed almost nothing.
And what percentage do you think of the bodies that you saw were charred, were ashes, were burned?
Fully burned, charred, very few. And that really broke us. You know, when we saw those bodies, we had to take a break. We had to hug each other. We had to say a prayer just to get the strength to keep going. There were many bodies of our beautiful women that were halfway charred, so that you can see a bone structure. You can see that there was a person there. That was most of the cases.
So there was systematic burning of the bodies.
Absolutely.
It was a systematic. It was a plan to burn the bodies.
Not just that, it was indication that many of them were burnt alive. Just the way their bodies were, the position of their bodies, you can tell that they were trying to protect themselves or in fetal position as they were lit on fire.
Right. The chief pathologist, Dr. Chen Kugel, was explaining that you could tell when people were burned alive by when there was soot inside of their lungs, because it meant that they were breathing while they were being burned. And so there were many bodies that were found with soot inside of the lungs, showing that they were burned alive. And so yes, that's something that happened a lot.
I couldn't have seen the lungs, but just from the positions, you could tell this person was in severe agony as their soul left them.
And what about what was the condition in terms of the private parts of the women? Were they raped? Did you see any indications, or did you get any sense of what had happened to them before they were killed or after they were dead?
The indication we got was that 90% of the women that we were able to prepare for burial, they came with their clothing. They were not, and the clothing wasn't removed. Again, different than regular burial. And we did see that they were, the clothing at the bottom part of these women's bodies did not have clothing on them. And they were also, we saw that shoes were missing, that they had been running and they had been, mowed down mid run. But we definitely saw that in most cases the women had been violated in some way. There was no way for us to tell if the woman was raped or something else happened. But when these terrorists came in and started attacking, these women were dressed.
And they were not wearing, the bottom of their body was not covered when they came in, just the top?
In many cases, because they tried to not mess with the bodies as much as possible, just pick them up and bring them so that, God forbid, no more harm would be done to their bodies.
When we were talking on the phone before I decided to tape this conversation, you were talking about the blood.
Yeah, so in Jewish law, we can't lose even a drop of blood. Every drop of blood must be buried with the body. And that made our work extremely difficult because most of the women and young girls and grandmothers, most of them were so bloody from so many wounds that we had to figure out ways to be able to collect that. And we had to pick the women up and hug them to our bodies in order to make sure that we did not lose anything from their body, from the blood. There were also body parts that had been disconnected that we had to make sure went into the burial with our beautiful women.
And you have to bury them in some cases with your gloves, is that?
That's right. So when we were dealing with the body and we got bloody, which often happened, and we were fully covered with plastic, so if our apron or our gloves got bloody, then we had to take them off and put them in a plastic bag that went into the burial with the woman.
So how do you do that? I mean, if it's a body that's buried in taklachim, in shrouds, where do you, and it's a bag, how do you prepare, how do you put it on a stretcher? I mean, how do you do that? What's the procedure? What goes in with the remains? How does that work?
So we were obviously learning on the job because the last time this kind of thing happened was in the pogroms in Europe.
Well, among the tank soldiers of the Yom Kippur War.
If they were mutilated, then that would have happened. But we did not have a precedent of how to do this. So we learned how to do it as we went. We finally figured out what to do because also the shrouds have to be 100% spotlessly clean. So no blood could be there as well. So we figured out how to put the tarkefim down and then a special blanket and then pads on top of that, and only then to put the body on top and remove the bag that she had been put inside of. And from there, we made sure to put pads on all the blood so that we could capture it. And the bag itself that she came in went into another big bag along with our gloves and aprons and was buried with her. So every body was prepared in the cleanest way possible.
How long did it take to do that? How long did it take to prepare a body but under these circumstances? How long should it take to prepare a body?
So normally preparation could be up to an hour. But we tried to do it as fast as we could. I think probably it took us about 20 minutes, a group of 6 or 7 women working together.
On the same person?
Yeah, we had to work together because the body's heavy and we had to move it around.
And did you change your aprons each time you got a new person to take care of, or were you able to wear one most of the time and not change it from person to person? How often did it happen that you had to bury your robes with the person?
Well, it only happened if there was a tremendous amount of blood and that got on us.
And that's the other thing about the wounds. There were multiple wounds on these women?
100%. Multiple wounds. It was a sadistic attack on each one of them.
So can you describe just an example of what you're talking about?
Seeing a woman with her arm hacked off. Seeing people burned together.
Tied up?
tied up, seeing this is my husband. He saw a grandfather who had been his hands had been tied behind his back, and then he was shot in the face. This seems silly, but I need to get this out. All of the jewelry was stolen, and I know that sounds so dumb, but it caused so much horrifying damage and humiliation and pain to our people. And then when they were done, they didn't leave without the little bag of a little prize of jewelry. Nobody had jewelry on them, and that's impossible.
So, how many days did you do this?
I did it for 1 week, pretty much every day. We from Gush Etzion, I'm representing a holy group of people. We went just about every day. I thought it was just that Saturday night, and then the next morning, emergency, you gotta come now, because once the body's been identified, we as Jews want to make sure that the body is buried immediately. So I raced over there, and we only had a team of 3, and we got it done. We got it as well as we could. But throughout the week, every day there was another call, and people from all over Israel, women from all over Israel, were saying, "Please let us volunteer as well." So our team got bigger, and but by the tragedy is that by Thursday, after Thursday, we had finished our work, even though there are still bodies that have not been identified.
Right, there are actually a lot of them. I can't remember what the last number was, whether it was 40 or 100. I don't even remember anymore. These are numbers that just sort of jangle around in your head. And I mean, like they said that there are 20 small children who lost both of their parents. There are 90 small children who lost one parent. There are another, I don't know what they said, 20 or 40, 18 to 25-year-olds who lost both of their parents. And it's like you have all of these numbers that are just sort of moving around in your brain, and you're trying to, but there are a lot of bodies that haven't been identified yet. And they said that there are like 880 civilians who were killed, and so far 700 and something have been buried. So
the last count I saw from the burial societies that they had managed to identify and bury over 80%. That leaves a good bit, almost 20%, that are not identified and not buried. And maybe, if the last bodies that we helped toward burial were just bags of charcoal, then I'm sure there are many that...
Well, they brought in archaeologists from the Israel Antiquities Authority. They have, I think, a team of 60 archaeologists from all over the country. They brought them to the beach in Zikim. They brought them to the kibbutzim, and they were sifting through the ashes because the houses were burned and the people inside of them were incinerated, and so they're trying to sift out the human remains from, the couch. And so that's actually the work of archaeologists. And then they and Chen Kugel was also saying that they got bags at Abu Kabir, the Pathology Institute, and there were remains of 5 people inside of one bag, and they had to sift through them and put them in separate piles. And it was Auschwitz. I mean, it was a crematorium that they did because they were also using fuel. So they burned the bodies, but then they added more fuel to the bodies and burned them again and again. So that, a lot of them are ashes. And that's what they were saying, that a lot of these people are never going to be able to be identified, probably. And they, like you said, they couldn't be identified through DNA in many cases. So
yeah, and that's to me, with the magnitude of the tragedy that we're facing, it's just the nail. I don't want to say the nail in the coffin. It's a terrible expression right now, but it just adds so much pain that the last right that we as Jews have is to bury our dead, and in so many cases we won't be able to. And even though the work was so hard for us, for the groups of women and men that were doing it, we were devastated when it ended, that we couldn't continue and make sure every single family had a body that they could put on the ground.
So how many hours a day were you doing this?
Probably about between 6 and 7 hours.
Then you come home. How many children do you have?
I have 6 children, thank God, and a son-in-law.
And a son-in-law. So let Hashem, you'll have lots of grandchildren, and everybody will be healthy. And how, and you have kids that are at the house, you have kids you are raising.
Sure.
Right? You have to come home, you have to make dinner, you have to get them to do their homework. How does that go? How did you handle it when you got home? What was the feeling when you walked in after what you saw during the day?
Well, the first thing I did is hug them, all of them. And I absolutely did not tell them what I'd seen. That there's no reason for them to have to know. And my husband and I, since we were doing it together, we shared in our bedroom, and that was it. We kept it there. Even for my older children, nobody needs to know what was happening unless it's for the record for the world, because the Holocaust denial was so fast and furious. So that's the only reason I'm speaking about it. But I had to shift gears very, very quickly. I did make one mistake, and one of my children was bothered by a thing, like her brother took chocolate that was hers, and I like, after seeing what I saw, like the heaviness, I was like, really, that's what's bothering you right now? But then I very quickly shut my mouth, because they don't have to carry that. And we went on as a family, knowing that the tragedy was here and with us. And I have my son and son-in-law had been called up that first night. So just focusing our energies on doing things for the people who are alive, for the soldiers, for the families. And that's how we've been coping.
I wish I didn't have to interview you, Like, I wish I didn't have your phone number. I wish I didn't have to get it and bring you in here. It's the most astounding thing is that, I don't know, it's a shocking and horrible thing to see the denial. Because what they're actually saying when they deny it is, oh, the Jews aren't the victims, they're the oppressors, right? And we're never going to acknowledge either how evil we are or how good the Jews are. And I look at you and your husband and all of these other women and men who volunteered for this unbelievable job. And I just take my hat off to you. I salute you, and you're such a living testament to the way that we sanctify life. And I just so appreciate that A, you've done what you've done, and B, that you were willing to talk about it, because it's unfortunately so necessary. So I think we're so lucky as a people that this is who we are, and that we come forward and we do these things, and that people like you come forward and take your role. And I'm sure that we're going to win.
Amen. Amen. And I think that the only reason I'm speaking about this, and every time I speak about it, it gets harder, is just because we have to have moral clarity. We have to know that this is not a territorial war, and this is not about a piece of land or any philosophical ideas. This is a war between evil and good. And I never thought I would meet that level of evil. I've seen difficult things. This was a level of evil that you can't wash out of your eyes. And people need to understand that there is no justification for this kind of evil. And that's what we're facing. War between good and evil. And we have to stay clear. And we have to stay moral.
I agree. And the effort to hide, to lie, to make this about the suffering of the poor people of Gaza, when you look at the depth of the depravity that was unleashed on the people of Israel, it's that in and of itself is evil. I mean, it's the apologetics, it's the attempt to explain away, it's an attempt to hide and then project the atrocities of the Palestinians onto their Jewish victims. And that is this like a secondary but really integral part of this whole effort to annihilate the Jews. And I think you're bearing witness to what you saw and to what you had to do is a very important part of winning this aspect of the war. So I thank you very much for coming in and also for what you've done. And guys, I'm sorry to lay it all on you like this, but you know, we all have a role to play, and in this war of good against evil, truth against lies, to tell the truth, to expose the truth, is to defend the truth, and to go after the liars just as hard as we go after the terrorists. So thank you guys all for watching, if you've made it this far, and I'll see you again later this week for another news analysis. So keep your eye on this space, and keep praying for us. Thank you very much.
Angel. Angel. Angel.
If you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand or membership card. I'm going to go to a very quick.
Angel. 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 I know you're a Jew, a Mortician.